Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just get underway with our meeting of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting this Thursday, 16th of May.
Au whakaronga kia ki te tangi atu manu e re runga rau e tuia. Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I roto, tuia I waho, tuia te heringa tangata, ka runga te pō, ka runga te ao ki hei mauri ora. Atu mi tuatahi mi kina atu a kaharawa, a ho mai o kaha, ho mai o aroha ki a mātou I tinei wā, I ngā waka tohoki. A ka huri au taku pokaro ki ngā tini aitua, a ku wehe atu ki te pō, haere, hari atu rā. A rātou ki a rātou, a tātou ki a tātou, tohunga ora, e nā kai mahi, e nā kai kaunihera, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou.
Welcome to the meeting, and I've been informed that there is a quorum present, and I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. Just to advise that the Chief Executive has withdrawn agenda item 8.11, which is the assurance update, understanding orders 9.9, withdrawal of agenda items. We just have a wee bit more work to do in that assurance space. It's also intended that agenda item 9.2.2 legal update in the PX paper will be taken at 2:30, which may require that agenda item 9 be moved prior to this item if the meeting's not sort of reached this particular item 9.2.3. The order of the reports will then continue in the order shown on the agenda. I advise that we don't have any apologies, no declared conflicts of interest. There's no public forum, no deputations and petitions. There's no extraordinary and urgent business, and there are no notices of motion. So we'll proceed to item 7.1, which is the unconfirmed minutes of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee of the 21st of February. Are there any matters of accuracy related to the minutes of our 21st February meeting? No. Good, then we'll, the recommendation on page 10 is that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee confirms the minutes of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting held on the 21st of February 2024. Have a mover. Graham McGlynn, second. Councillor Robinson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.1, which is the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report of May 2024. And Giles is going to speak to that one. Generally, everything is green. Are there any are there any issues that you want to talk about?
Just to highlight for the committee that there is a briefing planned that will include the item on forestry and other land uses for later this month for council, and also the recommendations relating to the terms of reference are awaiting the work that council is doing to review its committee structure in the light of the plan support service model under the draft long-term plan.
No issues of clarification, so I'll put the motion and then we'll have an opportunity for discussion if required. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report, May 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Robinson, second. Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion? No. Okay. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. The next report we have is 8.2, the Health, Safety and Wellbeing update on page 59. And invite Wendy to come to the table. Wendy and Barry to come to the table.
Kia ora koutou. The main points of the health and safety paper are an update on the critical risks and where we're up to, an assurance piece in terms of the key controls around driving, and also an update on the reportable incidents. There is a point of clarification in terms of the dashboard, and so you'll notice that bottom left picture, it mentions workplace transport water as having 5 incidents, and that's got down from the line above, but it should be land. Those are all low risk minor vehicle incidents, including some minor damage to vehicles. So we'll issue an updated version of that after the meeting. So we're open for any questions, any points of clarification.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Thank you for the report and the work that we are doing on critical risk assurance. I just noted at the top of page 61, the incident reporting, we had 11 near-miss events, and in my mind, the feedback loop, as we may have discussed in the workshop yesterday, the critical role of near-miss reporting, and how do we embed that in the organisation as a process that informs our conversations, as opposed to a process that might see someone feeling as if they'll be whipped or condemned or whatever. So for me, really the importance of embedding that near-miss culture and to inform that feedback loop. we can look at stats and then say, yeah, no one has died, or we haven't had any significant trauma or this or that or the other, but we don't know how close those incidents were. So just reinforcing the importance of embedding that in the process.
Thank you, John. Any other points of clarification? Thank you very much, Wendy, and Barry may now leave the table. Thank you. So I'll put the motion, and then there'll be another opportunity to discuss if we need that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the report on health, safety and wellbeing. Have a mover. Graham McGlynn, second. Julie. Any further discussion? Being none. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Our next paper is the Treasury report from Bancorp Treasury Services, and invite Brian Elliott and David Walker from Bancorp Treasury to present the report. Welcome, David.
Good afternoon, all. Pleasure to see you all again. The intention today is just to run through the normal stuff, but with a plan to give you time to ask questions at the end. I think that's probably hopefully sort of value add and the bit you find most interesting. So let's run through it. So just confirming, as to be expected, everything is fully compliant from a policy perspective. It's continue to be well managed. There's just been a small increase in the weighted average cost of funds, just with 90-day rates remaining as high as they are. But all the other control measures that we look at, maturity profile, liquidity, and all the other basics that we look at, all as they should be, in fact, in very good order, and just reflecting hopefully a good management sort of position. Just moving to the slide on the top left-hand point of view, top left-hand. Sorry, start again. Let's look at the graph in the top left-hand corner. the bit that's got the circle around it, that's the bit that we'll be focusing on for the next quarter. We've got a situation where with slightly high levels of debt and just time erosion, we need to be looking at some forward start type transactions to make sure that council remains policy compliant for the 30th of June. And we'll be talking to Brian and team in regards to some forward start swap strategies. We're just waiting for slightly better rates to do those, but there'll be some communication around that in coming weeks. We saw a movement overnight that hopefully is encouraging in that regard. But yeah, in terms of that, that's just sort of a bit more information on the previous slide, which basically shows that everything is being well managed. In terms of strategy considerations for the coming quarter, the first bullet point, already spoken about that. We just need to be looking at some interest rate risk management activities in coming weeks. And that second point there, that's a very preliminary high-level conversation. No detail is probably needed on that at this point in time. And once you get through the LTP process, we'll be focusing on just cash management to make sure that we've got all your short-term deposits well structured, particularly that balance between call and term deposits. And what's on mind for the coming quarter? This is the bit that I hope you find most of interest. Look, there's no doubt that the New Zealand economy is basically doing it tough. All the economic data, with the exception of the tourism sector, is coming in worse than the expectations that we had for it, and those expectations were pretty poor anyway. So there's no doubt the New Zealand economy is basically doing it tough. The really interesting situation is normally the normal rules of the game are you get a weaker economy that flows through in terms of weaker inflation. The reality yet we're not seeing that. It will just be a timing issue, but it's taking a lot longer than pretty much all economists thought that would happen. And if we look across at some of our comparative countries in terms of Australia and the US, they're facing pretty similar sort of situations as well. The next bullet point is geopolitical issues. In terms of geopolitical risk, you put that at a high level, and the levels of unknowns are basically increasing. Obviously, we've got Middle East issues. We've got situations in terms of Ukraine. Now, that all poses risks for New Zealand as being a trading country and for a country that is mainly an exporting type country as well. So that's something that we'll continue to follow closely. Potentially, that may bring opportunities for us from an interest rate perspective. And interesting too, the US election, depending on the results, you forget the whole US monetary policy setting sort of thrown up in the air. No one really knows exactly what would happen next if there's a change of government. Now, the next point relates to three waters, or I refer to as probably two waters now, and I know this doesn't affect ECAN, but it's interesting to know that the first of the solutions has been unveiled, which is obviously the water care and the Auckland City Council situation. So that's starting to be fleshed out now, and if anyone wants to talk further about that, please ask some questions about that at the end. Next point, there's a key difference between the bank economists' forecasts, but I think that the one main trend that we'll put in that, even though different banks have different views in terms of it, all the banks in the last quarter have marked down what their projections for interest rates will be in months, years ahead. And as I said earlier, the key risk for us is that inflation just falls more slowly than what the markets are predicting. But the consensus view that we agree with is the question is that it will happen. It's just a question of when that happens. And the last graph here, I think it's the last graph here, is just this purpose of this graph is just to show the range of opinions between the banks. I think I made this point at the last meeting, that the range of opinions are quite significant in terms of will the Reserve Bank sort of modify its stance on getting inflation to 2%, or will it be happy with rates at between 1% and 3%? Will the Reserve Bank basically be prepared to sacrifice its inflation targets because of the pain that's causing the economy? And different banks and even internally in Bancorp, we have different views on that ourselves. And as I said, we rattled through that, and hence now the opportunity for any questions.
Graham. Right, let's chair this standing down to get to them. We're sitting pretty close to the bottom end of the bands there, and we've highlighted that, thanks. Given and looking at that, then looking at the funding rates going out into the various tranches out to 29, I'm seeing still numbers that are fairly high going out into the future, and just trying to work out where in the bands within our policy band should we be sitting. That last slide that you had up with the various predictions, looking out the future, we're looking up into the 4s and 5s, and yet it's somewhat different to where the predictions are when we get into the 30s. 2030 period roll off, we're seeing some differences. So I'm just trying to reconcile all that in my head.
Yeah, no, good questions. What we at Bancorp, our view is that we will see in coming months, we will see swap rates, particularly forward start swap rates, in the very low 4s. And the plan is to sort of top up cover there, or maybe in the high 3s. But in terms of your question around the policy bands, when we see rates at the 350 to 375 level, that's where we'd want you to be in the middle of the policy bands. And so our overall strategy is that we're targeting the parts of the curve that represent the most value. So we'll do some forward start swaps, maybe sort of 4s between the 3s. And then when the Reserve Bank does cut rates, that's the bit that will impact the short-term rates, and we kind of backfill from there. So we do the rates that represent the most value now, and then when rates fall, we increase the level of hedging right across the curve. But in terms of our goalposts, we see the official cash rate goalpost is around 350, which would imply swap rates sort of around that sort of 375 to 4% level. And that's what we're trying to achieve for ourselves.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. You mentioned that the paper mentions that generally in this last quarter or the third quarter, the New Zealand economy's been universally poor, with the exception of tourism-related data. And for Canterbury, do you have an indication in Canterbury, for example, that where tourism is important to us, what the effects of that are? People growing tourism?
I wasn't expecting that question. I think Canterbury, to some extent, it is. Christchurch is kind of the second gateway to New Zealand, so it should benefit from the increase in tourism numbers. I think probably, and I'm not sure if that's what you're inferring, but while Canterbury does benefit, it may be to a lesser extent than other communities. I'm thinking maybe like the Central Otagos and that type of thing. But in saying that, just personal anecdotal information, seeing tourists, they're travelling right across the country, so it is of importance. But sorry, I can't quantify that number yet.
I could comment if you like. We're heavily involved in the tourist industry at home, and the answer is that the numbers have bounced back pre-COVID level, but the demographic that's coming to New Zealand has significantly changed. The mass Asian market hasn't come back to New Zealand, and that's affecting the main tourist destinations such as Queenstown, Rotorua, and other such destinations. But the demographic that is coming to New Zealand is probably a higher net wealth, on average a higher net worth, and so the lesser destinations, and Canterbury is part of that, are probably benefiting more than they were pre-COVID. So I don't know the exact number other than the tourist the contribution of tourism to the New Zealand GDP is now back up to pre-COVID levels. It's a significant change. Some businesses are doing worse, some businesses are doing better, depending on where they fit in the demographic. And clearly, cruise ships is a demographic that has immediate benefits to Maria and Christchurch.
Thanks, Ian. You mentioned those global things. I think also in your report you mentioned China, the effects of China. Is that in your report? But yeah, the effects of worrying risks for both New Zealand and the global economy continues to be with China. Is that what they're doing globally, or what's your feeling with it?
In terms of China,
you mentioned here about the reduction in the benchmark mortgage rate. Is that a worrying thing in the global impact?
yeah, China, and excuse my wording here, is tricky. It's really hard to get a gauge in terms of the accuracy of the data. I think China is going to suffer from China is a trading nation. So if there's any signs of deglobalization, it will suffer, and that will basically flow through to New Zealand, because China is, I think it's our biggest trading partner. And China also has significant sort of demographic type issues as well, which will take probably a decade or so to manifest itself. But it's still an extremely important country and nation, particularly for a country like New Zealand. And it is interesting because China is important to us, but also Australia is important to us. And the links between Australia and China are really significant. So we kind of potentially get hit two ways if China struggles.
Councillor, no further questions? Graham, sorry.
Look, and thank you. Kia ora, thank you for that that snapshot. Maybe just looking sort of further into the future, and I'm not sure whether you can answer it, but maybe you can give us a guideline, because we've actually got an assumed rate around 6%, which is, I'm just basing this on the 10-year plan, where the council actually intends to borrow additional 110.7 million. And then looking at the interest on that 28.1 million over 10 years, that's on an assumed rate of 6%. So with all of that doom and gloom, some ways than others, with that, and I know it's an assumed rate, but would that actually affect that kind of thinking with what that snapshot is? Or is it like going to buy a lotto ticket and figure out what the winning ticket is?
Well, I would say perversely in this game, doom and gloom is good for interest rates. It means lower rates. But what I draw your attention to is that graph bottom left. Now that's what we've calculated as your projected cost of funds going out over that sort of time period. So based on that, your 6% rate looks very good. Yeah, and with a buffer obviously as well. Yeah, and interesting too that those projections change. Even though you like to think they're constant, literally they're changing. Those predictions change on a daily basis as new information comes through. But what I can say is if the economists are anywhere near right in terms of their forecast, then 6% looks very comfortable.
Great.
I guess a supplementary question which actually builds on Rick's question. If you look on page 71 with the LGFA borrowing rates, and we look at the future projections about where 90-day rates and such like are moving, there's about if you look out, there's about a 3% difference. So are we better as a strategy to, where we can, to defer borrowing to allow the rates that the LGFA are charging us to drop in line? Because we're seeing 671 for May 35, for instance, for some of our long-term projects. And if the thinking is that if we're taking on at the end of the 10-year plan, we'll have $200 million worth of debt, that sort of is equating up to a difference in interest rate on current rating of 3% or something.
That's an interesting question, but that's almost a political question as much as a financing question, isn't it? Because it means you have to delay your infrastructure, your services. It is interesting across the general local government sector, where a lot of councils are in a significantly tougher position than yourselves, that they are being forced to make choices which are in line with what you're alluding to here. But look, from a dollars and cents basis, the answer to that question is probably yes, but you've got to just think about the trade-offs in terms of when services infrastructure would, and hopefully the benefits deriving from those would come through.
Sorry. If you look at the current LGFA borrowing rates and the rates that you're showing on the forecast market implied rates, is there not a significant risk that we will have contracts that are out of the money going forward over the current years, looking at our current profile that we've got, and therefore we have a risk in future years that we're going to have to market and take some reasonably significant hits.
Yeah, that's why we have a treasury policy, right? And the last thing we want to do is have a situation where we've got the tail wagging the dog in terms of mark to market. What the conversation here is a potential situation is if we do some fixed rate contracts and interest rates fall, then if you mark those to current market, it shows a loss. It's just that it's not a cash loss, it's just a mark to market loss. But basically that means that interest rates have fallen, which in the bigger picture is what we want for again. So it's a strange, my life is quite strange in terms of what I wish for, but still ultimately we're trying to position ECAN so it's protected from a situation of high or rising rates, but on the same basis it can benefit from a situation where rates are falling. So it's just a case of getting that balance right.
When we're not speculators, so that's why we have a policy, but you ought to be aware that the policy doesn't guarantee you an optimal result.
Thanks, Graham. Councillor Swiggs, would you like to talk about Graham?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you raised a couple of points before in your assumptions of the international situation that's going on. Have you built into those assumptions the currency fluctuations that are going to take place in relation to New Zealand and US dollar and stuff like that? That's going to have quite an impact, and I think that's going to really rock the system. But also, very recently, the tariffs that are going to be in place, especially for us who are buying electric vehicles with trade departments of America, the tariffs that are going to be placed on different stuff over in the States. So, I mean, that'll impact the cost of borrowing, maybe not from a central bank perspective, but from a lot of the places that you're talking about where we're going to borrow in the market. So you might see a situation where you get a difference between the central banks pulling down, but you've got the markets that pull up. So have you looked at that? Is that in the assumptions that you make? Because I think that's something that's really important.
Well, firstly, those assumptions, they're the market assumptions. So they're what we derive from the current interest rate. So in theory, everything that is known around about the world at this point in time is basically built into those assumptions. Now, the thing is, when new information comes to hand, which I think is probably some of the stuff that you're talking about, and that's the case with the future. my line about the future is, it's not written yet. No one knows what that holds. But I think one of the points that I made here, and maybe it's a point that you're alluding to as well, that say potentially there is a change in government in the US. The top Republican has made it clear that he's not a fan of the current framework and the current Fed lead. Also, too, he's a big fan of tariffs, even bigger than the current tariffs that you've probably just alluding to. It's a really interesting question because an American first type approach has real risks for the rest of the world. So, yeah. So, we just have to watch, monitor, and manage as best we can there. In some respect, I was going to say, it's not a case of hoping for the best, but being realistic as well.
Thanks, David and Brian. Thanks for answering those tricky questions. You may now leave the table. Thank you very much. The recommendation, I'll put the motion, and then there'll be an opportunity to have a further discussion if you wish. The recommendation on page 64, that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the report from Bancorp Treasury Services to 31st of March 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Karakia, Councillor Sunkel. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move to the quarterly performance report 8.4 on page 74 and invite Carmen and Brian to come to the table.
So good afternoon, everybody. So this is the quarter 3 performance report for the period ending 31st of March 2024. I'll just make a few comments on it, but otherwise generally take it as read. So at the end of the third quarter, you'll see there were 35 of the 40 levels of service were either achieved or on track to be achieved for the year. So this gives us a forecast achievement rate of 87.5%. That's very consistent with what we have reported for the last 2 quarters. It compares to an achievement rate of 75% for the previous financial year. In addition to that, 28 of the 34 key initiatives are also on track or completed for this year, and that's very consistent with what we reported last quarter as well. We will have the opportunity to discuss the portfolio reports in more depth at the relevant committee meetings. So I know the Water and Land Committee met last week, and the rest of the committee meetings are towards the end of this month or early in June. So there will be that opportunity to discuss them in more depth then. Just one final comment from me is this performance report follows our portfolio model that we currently have, but in the new financial year, as we transition to the core services and embed our impact framework, our performance reporting will look different in the future, and staff are doing work behind the scenes on that to bring a new performance report through the new financial year. I'll take the rest of being read. I don't know if Brian wants to add anything.
From the financial point of view, the only real difference worth pointing out is that as at the end of March, we have brought into the accounts all our commitments in our system at the current time. So we actually appear to be slightly overspent for the period to March, but that largely is accounted for by the fact there are some contracts and orders out there that will actually cover 2 or 3 months. So by the time we get to the 30th of June, they'll have unwound and we'll be back to the budget again. But yes, this is the first time we've attempted to do this, and as you can see by the paper, we had about $6 million worth of outstanding orders and commitments at the end of March. So it is interesting to note that we are still within courier budget despite that at this point.
Thanks, Brian. Do you have questions?
Through your chair. One of the significant items that's progressed from being a risk to an issue is the complex consents delivery, and I think this committee, given its role, should probably have noted somewhere within the discussions here the significant achievements that have been made as we're trying to knock the backlog off, and paragraph 60 on page 83 refers to that. I'm just wondering if anyone's in a position to give us a little more update for the clarity of the committee, so that it's at least in the record for this committee that we're keeping an eye on this particular matter, which is, as I said, now an issue, not a risk.
Got our councillors. I can give a quick update. So, yeah, consent backlog is progressing really well. We've knocked off over half of our consent backlog to date. It's obviously still having a financial impact, as we are still required to pay refunds on old applications that attract the discounts requirements. But we are managing to both keep on top of new work that is coming in. We've had really pleasing results with our timeframe compliance there. So new applications, our timeframe compliance is steadily lifting, and we're sitting around 70. I think it's actually higher than 70 now for our new applications, which is great because they are not attracting the financial applications there within timeframes. And we're making steady progress on our consent backlog, so that is well on track to be cleared by the end of the year, assuming we keep up the progress that we are making now.
All right. No. Kia ora. Just supplementary to that question, because I had a sort of similar question around the legacy consent question. And you've given pretty much a progress report on trying to clear the backlog. Is there any idea as to lost revenue?
Lost revenue in terms of the refunds that have been attracted. So I think that's sitting at around 600,000 year to date. But it is really hard to forecast what is sitting in the backlog until it's actually been processed.
Through the chair. So the two questions though is that, so when do you think, this is quite a really wide question, that we get back to business as usual?
Pretty confident that we should be there by the end of the year. The end of, not the financial year, the end of the calendar year.
One more. So the other part of it is that the longer term implications of it. Got a view on that?
Provided we, through you, Mr. Chair, I apologise. Provided we clear the backlog by the end of the calendar year, we should be well on track to be back to promoting our level service around our timeframe compliance, which then in turn won't attract the financial implications of the refunds that are required. So it's expensive now while we're sorting the backlog, and then it should be back on track for business.
Councillor McKenzie. Really, I've got a question which sort of lines up with Graham's question, but this is about the transport portfolio. So 55, page 82, you talk about the financial risk is identified in terms of total mobility. And so I guess my question really is, why haven't we itemised financial risk to this organisation of a change in funding for central government funding for our care box recovery, in line with the discussions we've had yesterday? Shouldn't that be appropriate for this budget, for this committee to note financial risk involved with that, in terms of not only funds coming in, but also our ability to maintain the service?
and this may not be the appropriate place, but I just note we have noted the financial risk around total mobility use. So if we are identifying financial risk there, perhaps we should be noting the financial risk of this organisation.
Yeah, from what my understanding is that the government is still deciding on the issue of mobility.
I think the risk around total mobility is specifically referenced in relation to this financial year. Obviously, any change in fare box recovery or any outcome of the finalisation of the GPS and the resulting NLTP will impact on future financial years. So the impact of the change in the total mobility regime is impacting on the financial performance of the council this year in terms of the increased costs.
Yeah, so this is the right place to register that risk.
Thank you. It's a continuation of the consent in question. I note in 61, we've noted 3.5 million in October last year that was brought forward to achieve outcomes, and we've had a brief discussion around as we've progressed, we will reduce the requirement to refund. Are we confident that our financial position within the consent space is in the right position? Will there require another call for monies over and above might be articulated in the long-term plan? Just where do we sit today in that funding space? Are we confident that we've got what we need to achieve?
So for you, Mr. Chair, the investment that was made for sustainable consents delivery of the 3.5 million was to address backlog in terms of resourcing and our new ways of working. It is very difficult to make assumptions accurately when we're working through the backlog. But what is forecast encompasses the deficit as best we can assume currently. So in short, at this point, no, we have the estimate that we made.
So I've got another question related to number 53, actually, which is around the cruise ship. Is that one? Okay. Brian, so, yep. I haven't even told you. Go ahead. Are you ready? Okay. So, yeah, acknowledge that this last cruise ship season has been successful in a number of ways, but moving forward, and one of the reasons why it was successful is because of the reduced pricing actually that the cruise ships actually put in place around, their own coaching. So have we got confirmation again from Christchurch, New Zealand, that they're going to continue that next year? Because that actually is what part of this is actually based on, isn't it? The success, because basically the reason why the passengers weren't actually using the cruise ship transportation because it was too expensive. And then when they dropped it, that kind of leveled it out quite substantially. But have we got confirmation that's going to happen again next season?
I don't believe we currently have confirmation, but we're certainly working closely with Christchurch and Z and our partners. We all recognise that it was a great success this year, and we want to continue that into the future. We also have the planned introduction of the national ticketing solution, which will also present some additional opportunities and challenges in relation to the cruise ship season. So we're working very hard with our partners and the cruise ship associations to make sure that it's success for all parties, including those visitors who come to Christchurch visitors and the residents of Lyttelton in particular.
Thank you. You're right. Robinson.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. Just regarding level of service 22.1, it still remains a risk, which is the Canterbury Regional Coastal Plan and the environmental plan. It just seems to sit here from year to year, and if it hadn't been for a notice of motion, at least opening it up, it would be currently on the agenda. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that it's still, you know, at risk, and it's still a level of service that hasn't been accommodated. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just a query on page 98. The biodiversity figures there for actual versus forecast. I just wondered, down the bottom in the financial analysis, it mentions that we received an additional 4.1 million of funding this financial year. Is that in those figures, or is that in addition to the revenue?
Yes, it's already in the forecast numbers, but hasn't actually been spent.
Any other questions related to the levels of service or the report?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate to add it to this or not, but with regards to the level of service 22, which I talked about before, an inquiry into the funds allocated for such a coastal plan review probably should be included here, because the funds allocated for that at the time were nearly $3 million. So I just wanted to put that on the agenda, that it wasn't something that wasn't accounted for, it was something that was reprioritised. So yeah, funds met around 2.77 million over the years since the last 2016. So I'm happy to distribute that round for that. That's been itemised. I just wanted to add it to the mix in this meeting because I thought it was appropriate. Would that be okay to table that if I share it around?
Yeah, I just wonder if you could, rather than this third quarter report, bring that to the climate change community resilience portfolio and discuss that at that time, the portfolio meeting.
I thought it would be appropriate, yeah, considering we talk about levels of service and not meeting them based on certain plans, waiting for biodiversity strategies and all that stuff. I just thought it would be appropriate to say that the money was there. It's a risk, it's finance and risk. I'm happy to bring it to that as well, but I think it's probably quite poignant with it here.
We'll note that. We'll note that comment because we haven't got the information in front of us. There being no more questions on the paper, Brian, Carmen, Aurora, you may now leave the table. Thank you. And I'll put the motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the organisational performance report for quarter 3, 23-24, and secondly, notes the status of the non-financial levels of service and key initiatives and financial performance and results for quarter 3, 23-24, period ending the 31st of March 2024. And thirdly, notes the key issues identified in the report impacting the non-financial and financial performance for quarter 3 and the actions being implemented to address these issues. Do I have a mover? Councillor Suncorp, second. Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.6. Sorry, where are we at there? Sorry, 8.5. Financial health report to the 31st of March 2024. I invite Brian to the table.
Fundamentally, the key element of this report is the outcome of the 9+3 forecast. We're back in the December 6+6 forecast. We were expecting to just meet budget basically by the end of the year. Situation has, however, improved since then into the 9+3 forecast, and we're seeing a uptick to an expected coming in under budget by about $2.9 million. Fundamentally, areas of movement are in the regional strategic portfolio, where of course we continue to be dealing with the consenting deficit development, but that has fortuitously been offset by a number of underspends in other programs, particularly in the data for decision making area. So we are working hard to deliver that forecast to year end. So we do expect to be slightly under budget, but may not come out exactly the 2.9. In terms of the CapEx forecast, we have also appended. Basically, we will end up with a small underspend in the CapEx area, as we're transferring $6 million from the current year forward into next year to fund some additional work on commercial building, etc. Within that also, there has been a slight overspend in the flood protection area. That arose because some work which was programmed for 2023 actually flowed over into the current year, and the corresponding budget did not come with it. So, however, that work is accommodated within the overall CapEx portfolio forecast and budget. Any questions?
Thank you, and apologies for a bit of a continuation of my previous question around consents, and I'm not looking for that position, and I recognise the flux of the long-term plan and everything that's going on within the building. But my question is, and how I've had it put to me is, we're now at a point of probably exceeding 5.2 million in uplift, and I guess my first question is, when did we find out that we were going beyond the 3.5 and reaching a 5.2 plus? And then we note that operations are looking to resolve the issue. That's and the notes will leave it an offset, but that's quite an open statement. So the comments on when did we realise and what are the options given this is the finance question?
Fundamentally, the increased overspend was notified as part of this +6 process, so we moved in January, which gave us quite an extensive few months to be able to address it. What we have found, of course, is that while operations people have control over their staffing and their process flows, etc., the issues of the backlog and that discounting factor are not necessarily controllable, and they have continued to push us down this rabbit hole of an increasing loss to some extent. Although all that could be done is being done to mitigate that in terms of those other control.
Councillor Karakia. I just want to ask a question around the year-end deficit forecast. Because so in this report here, so expected operations deficit is just under 1.92
at year end, which is said to be in line with the previous 6+6 forecast. But there's limited commentary here. First of all, about the drivers behind the deficit, and then so you want to address that one first, and then the second one is what are the actions being to actually mitigate them.
Fundamentally, when we put the budget together originally, we recognised there were going to be significant cost pressures during the year. We weren't entirely sure where they would land or how they would occur, but we did put aside a 9% fund to offset those cost pressures. What we're seeing in terms of the deficit is simply the outturn of those pressures to at the end of the day. And I think most people would agree it's been a very interesting and challenging year financially, inflation-wise, labour cost-wise, etc. And 9 million would have put aside all these things, but basically may not have been enough at this point. But it has been enough not to see large numbers of the bottom line.
So just in regards to the variances, in the next sort of reporting, is it possible to actually be able to break down those major variances, with each portfolio? Because then we need more of that detailed level, because we can then understand what areas are underperforming and what areas are effective.
I mean, noting that the next forecast report will be in October for the September quarter, and will be in the core services function. So just
add to what Brian has said for the committee's visibility. Over the last couple of years, we continue to make steps to improve our financial management maturity. This is only the second year that we've done quarterly forecasting. Previously, the organisation only did a 8+4 towards the end of the financial year. So we continue to mature that ability to understand our cost profiles. We believe that the shift to the core services model and having greater clarity about accountability for spend and who's accountable for what budgets will help improve that further. I think your question, Councillor, around the year end and how we manage those overspends and forecasts. We're acutely aware that many organisations and Environment Canterbury has not been immune to this. With the year end spend, unexpected spend, we've put in a number of proactive steps to help to try and manage that so that we avoid an additional upturn in spend, so that we land on the forecast that Brian has articulated. So there's active working with budget holders and the finance business partners, the inclusion of the commitments with the purchase order, and understanding what's already in the system is also another mechanism to help us land more, close to where we're forecasting. And so we continue to take steps to help improve that financial management, because by spreading the spend evenly throughout the year as per our intentions is how you get good value for money, rather than having lumpy spend towards the end of the financial year.
Thanks. Yeah. Any other questions? There being no other questions, Brian, thank you very much for your report. Good to see where we're at here. I'll put the motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the financial health report for the period ending 31st of March 2024 and receives the attached 9+3 forecast report and the projected forecast operational overspend of 920,000 at the end of the financial year. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sunkel, second, Graham McLean. Any further discussion? I just want to pick up on what Brian said in terms of a really challenging year. For a start off, we put a very we limited the annual plan budget to the 10%, trying to keep it do as much as we could within that, and then things have come along as well. I mean, I'm just noting the air quality transport urban development. I mean, the surprising thing that's surprising us is the fair trial and the effects that has had on uplift in patronage and the additional income derived from that. So that's, you know, that's a good thing within this process. You know, I also note the fact on the climate change and community resilience item on page 123 there, item 14. You know, we've had to respond to quite a number of flood events and oil spills and those sorts of things. So things have happened during the year that we've had to address. And really, I think given all of those things, we're not in a bad position, really. Anyway, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 8.6, which is Audit New Zealand, the 2023-24 audit plan. We'll invite Karen to the table. Chantel to the table. Sorry, Chantel.
Providing them an opportunity to introduce myself.
If you could do that, that would be great. You know, we met the other day, and yeah, great.
Afternoon, everyone. You would have seen in the paper that you have a new appointed auditor. So Yvonne has been for the last couple of years. We've had to manage our portfolio due to one of our directors planning his retirement, and we thought we would manage that a bit earlier so that we're not sort of in the middle of an annual report review when that happens. So you will still have Yvonne with you for the LTP process, and I will be with you for your annual plan audit. My name is Chantal Gnansky. I've been with Audit New Zealand since 2018. An audit director in that time. I've worked with a number of different councils through that period, including some other regional councils on the West Coast. I understand that we are so different, and everyone is, you know, slightly different from each other, but I'm hoping that I understand your environment as well enough to be able to add some value through the process. From a transition perspective, I have been your quality assurance reviewer on the LTP, which means that I understand where you plan on going. So hopefully that will put us in a good stead going forward. That's it.
Thanks, Chantal. Are there any questions that people might have of Chantal of the proposed audit engagement letter plan? Those questions of clarification, but we're looking forward to working with you, and of course you'll meet the staff, and you'll be working with Brian and Giles and other members of the team. My understanding is that some of your team are familiar, obviously, with the organisation, how we go forward. Apart from receiving the plan and your engagement letter, we have received your fee proposal as well, so we'll get back to you on both of those as soon as we can. Yeah, so we'll just do that and go forward on that. Being the case here, look, you can leave the table and I presume you'll wait around for the end of the meeting, and then we'll have a discussion with you as well. Thank you very much. what we will do is probably write a letter to the Auditor General's office, just expressing concern about how rapid the change in the position was, and just to formalise our thoughts on that. I'll put the motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the audit plan 23-24 update provided by the Audit New Zealand. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, second, Councillor Robinson. Any further discussion? I just wanted to highlight some of the things that you're focusing on in the plan. Some focus areas that sort of fairly standard things. The risk of management override of internal control, so that's something that we've looked at in the past. The valuation of forestry assets, which is another focus which we kind of continually look at. Valuation of property, plant and equipment, asset impairment considerations, and of course a big thing for us at the moment is the national ticketing solution process, which we're heavily involved with as well. And then some material issues that you're keen on looking at, level of service 26, flood protection and drainage infrastructure. Level of service 27, which is the flood events, that sort of thing. And it's supporting communities for air quality issues, and delivery of cost-effective public transport, and delivery of the effective consent and compliance monitoring process. So they're very good, and I presume in the process there too, I think the climate change, how we're managing climate change as well. Thank you for that. There's been no further discussion from anyone. Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Jim. I do wonder, and we've had conversations as we always do around the cost of audit fees and the like, and as we have a transition from one auditor that we've figuratively had trained in the space and understands our processes and systems and the like, and we move to a new auditor and without at all challenging your ability, I wonder, the costs continue to increase through this period of time while Chantel embeds herself in the organisation. Should we challenge the price of the audit fee? Is there an element of education involved on both sides?
I can explain what your plans are for that.
Thank you very much, through the chair. The audit fee, as it's determined, is for an efficient audit. So that is an efficient audit from our side, as well as an efficient audit from your side. So you're absolutely correct. There will be some learnings that will happen as I transition through the organisation. There will be questions that I'll ask, etc. There might be some new views that we need to work through from that perspective, as happens when any new audit comes onto an organisation. But that shouldn't affect what the efficient audit cost would be, and that's what we presented in terms of the audit data. Any additional costs from our side are our costs, and we'll make sure that those are managed appropriately.
John,
just to support what Whakatau said, we received the final audit fee for last year's audit, which, as per the terms that we agreed, did up to an increase of some additional costs. But included in that, and as the committee may recall, we agreed that we would have the book exercise, was a substantial sum included that recognised the cost of the audit fee. Standard environment council, which they did not charge us for. Unfortunately, they did not reimburse us for the cost of our staff time or training them, but I think that's slightly optimistic. So I feel reasonably comfortable, but what the council may not appreciate having that audit change after only 2 years. We are in as good a position as we could be with somebody who has a quality review auditor for LCP, but does have an understanding of how an audit team needs to change from.
Yes, your audit team remain consistent.
Thank you for that. And it's always an awkward question to ask. It's a service that's imposed upon us, and we feel at times that then it's a bill that we are required to pay regardless of what their process is. So thank you for that, for the brief conversation, and I guess assurance that we do have some processes in place to give effect to some of the things that happen. Thank you.
Right, all those in favour, please say aye. Oh, sorry, Graham.
I was going to say that I just informed the committee I've been involved in a number of discussions with the Auditor General himself and some of his colleagues about across, because I'm on 5 councils, about the lack of market testing to establish effectively what a market rate for auditing a council is, and it's very much we're using our own cost there, and it's not being put effectively to market. I have the benefit of being on 2 councils that do have third-party auditors, and there are some metrics which should suggest that Audit New Zealand's not quite as cheap as it could be, but we actually statutorily have no choice. We've just got to suck it up. We can't go out and test, and that's not a comment about either Yvonne or Chantal or their provision thereof, but I am also, as an ex-auditor, partner licensed auditor, I do know that the first year audit probably creates more risk. Second year, you probably start to get it right, and I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't get years 3, 4, and 5 to move on after, to quote Councillor Sunkel, we're trainer. But welcome on board and look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Graham. Okay. After that discussion, all in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.7, insurance renewal. And Brian, if you could come back to the table, thank you.
Yes, this item is really just providing the committee with an idea of the insurance renewal process, which will occur in 2 tranches, one being the public liability and professional indemnity in May, June, and then the balance of our insurances in the October-November period. Beyond that, I'll just take the papers read if there are any questions.
The question I'd signalled was the discussion that our PI cover for services that ECAN provides outwards. It's been $300 million, and I think it's been that for as long as I've been an independent. There's been considerable inflation across that period, and also I perceive there's potentially a change in the litigation environment, because I'm aware of a potential case arising out of a SoftBank failure elsewhere in the country, and parties looking to potentially hold a regional council there. It's only in the thought processes, it may never happen, but I just wonder whether 300 mil, given if we had a major breach in one of our stock banks and there was a bit of, we were held to account potentially, or someone tries to hold us to account, whether we have got an adequate pool there.
Each year, this is covered under the public liability insurance, which we deal with in March. And each year, when they review it, they review it against the claim trends, or this type of activity. They were seeing last year when we were at the upper end of claims during the $10 to $20 mark with the experience. So obviously 300 gets substantial headroom. But once again, it's a different scenario which we're actually trying to deal with. But we do review it every year this time.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's in the light of Hawke's Bay and Gabrielle. I'm not having been on Hawke's Bay District Council Audit and Risk Committee, and I know what they wrote off in their books that the cost value in their written down book value, I think, was 294 million, just within the council, let alone the community. So, you know, I think it would take very much imagination, as we know from Christchurch earthquake, the numbers can get quite mind-boggling. So I just sort of flag that whether claimed history doesn't really take into account perhaps direction of travel and the climate change risks that we're getting more severe storms more regularly. I don't think any of us can deny that. We've declared as a council a climate emergency, and just wondering how all that lines up.
Thanks, Graham. I suspect that it's the quality of the engineering and the quality of the peer reviewing and the quality of construction and those sort of things after that. It's actually other people's control. But we have an extremely good, competent river infrastructure team that's known throughout New Zealand for their competency. But as Brian, as you say, that these are the insurers, and presumably they're doing enough checks and balances that they feel comfortable with that.
Well, they do operate 500 councils and government agencies across Australia and New Zealand. So they benchmark across whatever with that 500 operate by
Any other questions? Councillor Robinson?
My question refers to the liability insurances that we might hold and any legal indemnity insurances that we might hold. The reason being is that Robin provided costs for the last since November on legal fees. And is it appropriate that it's brought up here? I think it is. So yeah, 648,573 on legal fees. My question is, what insurances do we have in place, knowing that this is quite an increasing amount over time? What do we have in place to mitigate some of that cost from the general reserves? Because it does come mostly from there, I believe. Is that correct? And yeah, so what have we got in place that could help knowing the path we're on at the moment? Thank you.
Well, we can't insure against generic illegal activity. It's only if it falls within those certain specific categories like public liability and special events. But it's outside that, many of our cases are we're not able to insure it.
Professional indemnity, would you not say though that something, if we say granted a consent and it was considered challenged, that it comes under indemnity or public liability, or what would you classify it as?
Yeah, I mean, obviously insurance is for extreme situations, not for set everyday expenditure, litigation. And so we, to my knowledge, to date, we haven't had any cases that apply the requirements for insurance.
Thanks, Brian. Councillor Mackenzie?
Well, I was really just checking the purpose of this paper. So it's really just for information. We're not asking us feedback as to whether you think insurance policy is appropriate.
Graham, is that?
I've got another question under the cyber insurance, but I'm a little concerned if I ask the question that the answer might require staff to discuss potential weaknesses in cyber, and that's probably not in the interest here. Is there an opportunity for me to, if you ask the question in public excluded?
we could do that as a minor matter that's not on the agenda. Or yeah, so we'll leave it. Okay.
It's just a reflection on my last question and the answer that I got. I mean, the incumbent responsibility for this committee is to ensure that our financial reserves policy and our ability to borrow to mitigate self-insurance risk is appropriate. That's where we should be focusing our attention.
No further questions, then thank you, Brian. Put the motion. Okay, that the motion for item 8.7 insurance renewal, that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the council insurance is held and the key uninsured risks. Do I have a mover? Brian McGlynn, second. Councillor Sunfall. Into the discussion. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Let's see. Right. Okay. We'll take it. I haven't closed, but
I just wanted to say I thought it was appropriate that I brought that up in that insurance system. It needed to be disclosed, so where do you can't do it? So anyway.
thanks, Genevieve. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.8, sensitive expenditure.
What time are you going to pull out for the? Is it 2:30? I'm just wondering, you've got 5 minutes between now for the next date to discuss whether you would move to go in or move, or you continue until you arrive.
8.8, sensitive expenditure. Brian, you come to the table.
The sensitive expenditure report is a compliance review report with certain selected expenditure items. You may be aware that there was a redaction issue with the system during publication of the original report, and that has since been replaced with a more correctly redacted. Other than that, are there any questions on this report? No questions? Councillor Selfie?
Sorry, just on the, if we've got the legal cost flag on the table, and it's last morning about actually understanding how the legal costs are tracking over time. But I sent an email through governance because I realised that company was flagged up. So it might be something that's come back to the next meeting and the flag that that's something that they know where we're tracking to.
Would you like us to note that request?
Yeah, you can note it. I have sent an email in, so we'll...
Thank you. No further questions, and thank you, Brian. Oh, sorry, Brian. Councillor Sunkel's just got there in the nick of time.
Thank you. Just for clarification again, consultancy contractors expense, Still Buildings construction, was that in relation to the $2 million worth expenditure that relates to?
We're not aware what exactly that's for.
Significant sum sitting in there, that $2 million.
Pretty certain it will be the plant construction. The only major steel construction. Slightly small. But I'm pretty certain it's kind of.
Thanks, Brian. So I'll put the motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the Corporate Sensitive Expenditure Report for the period 1st of July 2023 to 31st of March 2024, and secondly, receives the people and capability finance report for the period of 1st of July to the 31st of March 2024, and notes that there are minor redactions in attachment 8.6.2 in accordance with section 7.2a of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act of 1987 to protect the privacy of natural persons. So I have a mover on that, Councillor Sunkel, seconder, Councillor Robinson. Any further discussion on the report? None. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll keep going. The next report is the risk management update report 8.9, and invite Tanya to the table. Tanya.
I'm going to take the paper as read, but just want to highlight a couple of key points. One of my favourite sayings is that risk never sleeps and risk management never finishes. So, you know, it's still very much strategic risk management, still very much work in progress. We have got ongoing discussions with the ELT, you know, which we're focusing at the moment at identifying those key mitigation strategies that go over our major strategic risks. And the other exercise that we did with ELT was what we call the Global Horizon Scan, where we looked at a number of international surveys. What they told us, we put the New Zealand lens over that, and then asked ourselves the question, what could the impacts or potential consequences of that be for a combined country? And that was a useful discussion in that respect, that basically all the things that those surveys highlighted are in some shape or form are included and looked at in the strategic risks that we've got on the
Thanks, Tanya. Are there any questions of this report? Graham?
More a comment that in recent times there's been some interesting articles about the risk of another pandemic coming, which is likely to be an influenza-based one and probably off bird flu, which has managed to cross the capital and has crossed to a small number of humans. But at this stage, no human-to-human transfers. But I just wonder, seeing that where it's time just to dust off the stuff we worked in COVID, consider capacity of our IT systems to, if we ever needed to get back to remote working, thinking about strategies to minimise spread of influenza type situation, and whether there's any critical areas, and just really a brief thing, just dust off.
I think we should probably note that comment about that. It's something to look at. But my question is, even though the team has done this thinking outside the square kind of thing, it's probably useful, isn't it, for councillors to have another session generally on some of the critical risk issues that we might be thinking about as well? Is that something that's on the horizon, that having a bit of a get together with councillors to have another session on risk appetite, those sorts of things?
Risk appetite is definitely on the cards, but we can expand that to have that discussion with council around, you know, other strategic risks that they see.
Just looking at your dashboard, and I see obviously it's a bit of a work in progress, if you like, and it looks like you're kind of reviewing things constantly to try to simplify it. But it's good having the dashboard there, and then having the likelihood of risk for the little chart. I think it's very clear about what's going on. and I do note the comment in the commentary box there. Climate change is the driver for a number of risks, and that's, you know, rather than a thing in itself, and that you're setting out other risks. Is there any inequity issue that's been raised in some of these strategic risks? Is there anything that you've picked up that you think might be inequitable in terms of population generally, people, and how those risks affect people?
I don't think that we've discussed that in detail, but off the top of my head, I don't think we did. What we have noticed is that some of the mitigation, some of the risks go in different directions. So there's always going to be the trade-off of, you know, prioritizing and where do we put our resources. But in terms of the I don't think that there is
And I suppose in terms of the commentary box to the economic environment, climate change, that those sort of issues can be picked up, further explored, and other either government legislation or whatever, or just other documents and documents. That's something that we always have an eye on that, and how those things affect us, the environment, and the people. Councillor Southey.
Yeah, but on that horizon scanning list, and was the risk of biodiversity loss something that came up? We're sort of surprised that isn't in there, or is it because we didn't feel as environment council something that was something that was explicitly directly correct? I'm not. Or yeah, I'm surprised because that biodiversity crisis is something that's on the radar as much as climate crisis, almost the material is connected. I know it's like with the bird flu, for example, in New Zealand is at risk because we've got so many already threatened unique species of birds, amongst other things. So yeah, I'm surprised not to see that there.
what you have there was the thought starters for the ELT to get the discussion going. There was actually more discussed in the ELT as such, and as we're working through, you know, unpacking the bundles of the risks we've gone and operationalising some of those risks, we'll get to some of that biodiversity. And I'm sure there's other stuff that's not in here. But yeah, this was mainly the thought starters to get the conversation rolling around the top table.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie. Yeah, on page 175 under effective relationships, and you've got J, which is a box saying relationship breakdown with central government. It's possible at a moderate risk. Is that accounting for? So what are the factors that are accounted for that's going on there?
I can back to you on that one because there's quite a bit behind each of those.
So that was not a fair question, but I guess my question really to be more specific is, are you reflecting on the direction of draft regional policy statement, which is clearly going against the intent of this new government?
I think what this risk reflected as well was around, you know, there was a change in government, where the direction of that government goes versus where we're sitting, changes in legislation, how do we position ourselves so it's mainly around that, and how do we keep that conversation with central government going, where do we put our efforts involved? We can provide more details about the specific risk if you want to.
Graham,
Page 117, it's chopped off on my screen, the one horizon scanning, 176. Climate uncertainty. You've raised a number of really good points in this one that have been coming out in recent publications. But one of the things for us to consider is our ability to ensure and mitigate those risks that might be changing or also reducing. So we're having to front more of them ourselves right up front, and you know, climate stuff, supply chain uncertainty, where we sit in the world, ability to get supplies through, exchange rate economic uncertainty that our friends at Bancorp were raising earlier. A lot of these are, it's actually hard for us, A, to mitigate, and B, to insure against. So we end up not being able to reduce the inherent risk that significantly. And I think we've just got to be fairly aware of the wider geopolitical and environmental aspects of all of this.
Yeah, so much is out of our control, really. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thanks very much for that, and it's good having the dashboard update as we've received it. And the horizon scanning, I think that's something we can look at. So I'll put the motion. Agenda item 8.9, risk management update, that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the progress on strategic risk management and notes that the current strategic risk profiles and their mitigations have been reviewed to ensure they reflect the relevant key risks identified in recent international risk surveys. I have a leader, Councillor Sunkel, second, Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So a resolution here to go into public excluded, and there's some people mentioned there who are able to stay for this particular bit of the meeting. Other people could leave for a short time. So we're just wanting to address item 9.2.2 in the public excluded section. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Pauling. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So we'll just move into the public excluded, and then we'll come back to the main meeting. Okay, we'll get underway now. So we're back into open meeting. So recording started again. We'll move to item 8.10, policy framework. Council Corporate and Tanya, if you could come to the table.
Again, I'm just going to take the paper as read, but again, there's a couple of things we'd like to highlight. There's two types of policies that we've got. One's of council policies, which are mainly governance, monitored by governance, and then we have corporate policies, which are governed by the corporate policy framework. In my role, I look after the corporate policy topic, but we are working with governance to making sure that we've got visibility over the council policies as well, and making sure that they are reviewed regularly.
I mean to say an apology from Councillor Southworth to attend another meeting. But, she may be there. Are there any questions on this report, Tanya? Graham?
Through you, Chair. Just looking at some of the dates that are on here, it would be useful to sort of indicate, as I put out this morning on the corporate policies date of approval, that when the next, the council policies, when they're next due, and on most of them there is an undefined review period on some of them. And also down under the corporate policies, some of them are under review, and I'm just trying to tie up against the corporate policy framework, which says that the agreed frequency should not exceed 3 years, and perhaps then give us an indication that when are we expecting these through, so that we as a governance group can oversee that this is happening without feeling that we need to get our fingers in. It'd be good if paper like this sort of sits there as a standing paper each meeting, so we can just quietly keep an eye on it and without perhaps getting lost in it.
Is that something that you could do with these two charts? Just put that information in for our next meeting.
Yes, as part of the recommendations, we actually noted that given this regular update is an agenda item, to include in subsequent meeting, so we can do that, yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, I recall seeing something a while back with the anticipated timeframes for these things, so that's great. There's no further questions, then thanks, Tanya. May leave the table, and I'll put the motion. So the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the statements of council and corporate policies, and notes the statements of council and corporate policies will be included as part of all future agendas for the committee. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, Councillor Sunkel. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to item 8.12, just a report from the chair. And this is just an opportunity to for you to ask questions about really any matters that you wish to include. You mentioned there the external audit, and Chantal's explained what's going on there. Changing environment. Of course, we're all aware of the government policy statement on transport that we're waiting on, which is important for our long-term plan going forward. Not just for us, but our Greater Christchurch Partnership as well. And then the thing that's happening across the country with the redundancies across the central government. There's an item there on threats, increasing threats to elected representatives. I'm not really aware of anything in councillor, weekend councillor being threatened at all. Obviously, it's keep an eye on it. The other issue is the Auditor General's draft annual plan, which was sent to people last Friday, and we've got to get some feedback to him. If there are any issues that people, Joel sent around a list of some bullet points that they're thinking of the feedback could focus on. Just to remind people, one of them was supporting the focus on performance reporting, long-term planning, particularly infrastructure, and the better use of data, cyber security, climate change, value for money and integrity. Another point of focus, welcoming the continued focus on enhancing the impact of the OAG with Kia Māori. And thirdly, finding it disappointing that the key issues impacting on local government do not seem to be considered in the plan, and the absence of work looking across both central and local government. So that would be one for me to pick that up. And then fourthly, acknowledging the challenges in the audit profession, whilst highlighting that the continued significant increases in audit fees are hard to justify. So that's sort of key things that sound pretty good to me, pretty all-encompassing. Giles, are there any other issues? If people haven't read the annual plan from the Auditor General, if they want to have a look at that or remind themselves what's in it, and then provide some feedback to Giles. If you think it's a matter that we need to cover. Does that sound reasonable? No one seems to have any further issues in the matter. So, we will move on to the next item. We have had a LTP financial risk assessment yesterday. So that was a really good workshop, picking up the internal and external risks that might affect our thinking, I suppose, in terms of a long-term plan. Are there any matters there that people want to raise again? Right.
If we're still on your sort of report with the chair by territory, it's useful to have a horizon scan session. I think where councils can get it, but I think it's actually really useful if the likes of our CE can end up putting a few notes together about where perhaps Stephanie, you can see the tips of mast appearing over the horizon and trying to work out, is it a battleship or is it friendly? Along that, and certainly in other audit and risk committees I'm on, that's actually one of the better sessions because it's getting people thinking about what might be coming at us and what angles people are seeing and what's happening out there in the wider world that could pose risks for the organisation. We've had a very good risk paper, but there's sort of that almost very short 5 or 10 minute brainstorm, perhaps prompted by council's thoughts and our CE and Director of Corporate Services, etc. is coming. What you're very well connected around the other regional councils in particular, and that's like, from my point of view, that's really useful to think about and just raise the awareness so that we don't get a surprise.
That sounds good, Graham. Stephanie, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I've certainly done that with AFRC in the previous triennial. So if that's what AFRC would like, I'm very happy to do so.
That sounds great. And we'll note that request. Okay. No other issues. We'll put that motion, the Chair's report, is accepted in the meantime. But just let me know if there's any issues. Between now and the next meeting, if people want to discuss, and we can put it on the note. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the report from the Chair of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. And mover, Councillor Robinson, second, Councillor Sunkel. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Okay. That concludes the meeting. The next meeting is the 28th of August. And close the meeting. Oh, Graham.
I will attempt to dial and I'll actually be offshore for that date. So perhaps in case technology goes wrong, we just note an apology and anticipation in case I can't quite make it through. We get committee exactly Karakia